Exploration of Morven by Stephen Meehan. With his back resting against a tree, Tarian held his canteen between his knees as he stared at the hull of the colonization ship. His gaze drifted to the gash running behind the metal carcass, and he drew in a breath as his eyes closed, expelling a tear. Lucinda stepped beside Tarian and leaned against the same tree.
Are you amazed that everyone survived the crash?
Tarian rose, his boots sinking slightly into the soft earth as he steadied himself.
Absolutely,
Tarian said, his voice strained. He paused, running a hand over his face.
Aside from the numerous injuries, some life-threatening, the only truly terrifying thing is the devastation of our livestock. If we don't find replacements...
He left the dire thought unspoken as he studied the makeshift shelters.
Especially since the more delicate equipment didn't survive.
Tarian took a swig from his container as he turned toward the rest of his team.
We lost the communications array and most of the medical equipment. Plus, we're having to relearn forgotten concepts we thought we outgrew long ago. While a handful of those here know the inner workings of the damaged equipment, we're limited until we discover the required raw materials, which seem to be absent on this rock.
We're searching,
Lucinda said, resting her hand on his shoulder.
Fortunately, most of these still work.
Tarian lifted his radio to his mouth.
Kel, how are things back there?
Same as before. We're waiting for fresh supplies. Any luck on that front in your sector?
Tarian took a sip from his canteen before his gaze drifted to his team, investigating the surrounding area.
While we're identifying some of the local wildlife and fauna, it looks like viable supplies are fewer than we'd assumed while in orbit.
Is anything potentially usable?
Tarian shook his head as he drew in a deep breath.
I doubt it. How about the other teams? Have they discovered anything?
Currently, every team is reporting similar results,
Keldon said, disgust and anger dripping from each syllable.
Based on the initial surveillance, that's what I expected. We'll be back once we finish cataloging this sector.
Tarian capped his canteen and returned it and his radio to his belt.
Lucinda, is it me, or is this planet's wildlife maddening?
As a raspy chuckle answered the chirping wildlife, Lucinda pointed at a nearby creature.
Certain animals here resemble familiar creatures, such as that amphibian. However, there are others like the wolven creatures who've been prowling our encampment that seem to be inspired by our myths and legends, based primarily upon their being larger than our surviving horses.
Tarian's hands fell to his weapon, and he blindly checked its functionality. When he'd reassured himself, he rubbed his chin.
I've definitely seen bizarre mixtures of normal animals from back home.
Tarian whipped to his left as he leveled his weapon at the swaying foliage. After several tense seconds, he lowered his rifle and turned toward Lucinda.
How's the cataloging going? Are we about finished with this sector?
The reports I've been getting have been wonderful.
I'm sure they are.
Tarian said, rubbing his neck.
But how much longer before we're done with this sector?
My team will need another hour or two before I'm comfortable moving on.
So be it,
Tarian said as he whirled back to the swaying branches. He inched toward the motion as he licked his lips.
Did you see that?
No.
The woman stepped up beside Tarian and studied the shifting foliage. With a scowl, she pulled out her scanner.
However, I'm sure our equipment will discover anything my eyes aren't capable of finding.
Then please inform me about what's there.
Nothing out of the ordinary.
Did that hill just vanish?
Lucinda looked up, and her jaw dropped when she realized the hill she'd commented on earlier had vanished. She looked down at her scanner briefly before her gaze whipped towards the clouds overhead. A scream erupted from Lucinda's mouth as she dropped to the ground. Tarian froze for a heartbeat as his gaze flicked up, finding an enormous creature emerging from the clouds. It was scaled like a lizard and had wings, yet it was almost half the size of their colonization ship and racing towards them. It unleashed a deafening roar. His chest tightened, a cold sweat breaking out. His gaze jumped to Lucinda and found she was already fleeing for cover. Tarian's heart thundered as the massive shadow hurtled towards him. As his adrenaline spiked, he bolted for cover, hands trembling as he fumbled for the radio.
There's a monster incoming. Find cover.
After issuing his order, Tarian emerged from his shelter. He aimed his rifle at the giant creature as he adjusted his rifle to its highest setting. He shifted his aim to the beast's eyes. In the space of a few seconds, he squeezed off a trio of shots. As the resulting bolts of energy raced toward the winged monster, it contorted, protecting its face. However, it couldn't escape the bolts, which tore a massive hole in its hide, silencing another guttural roar. Wounded, the creature plummeted and collided with the ground. Tarian stepped away from the boulder after retrieving his radio.
Everyone, proceed cautiously to that location. There's a chance more are circling.
With his order given, Tarian sprinted to where the mangled monster lay. Between the shattered body and the charred flesh, Tarian tightened his grasp on his rifle. When he stood beside it, he prodded the thing with his weapon. No movement. Tarian released his held breath. Caleb lowered his rifle cautiously.
Tarian, what was that?
A nightmare.
Lucinda said.
It looks like a dragon,
Jacob said, kneeling beside Tarian.
like from fantasy stories.
Tarian exhaled slowly, glancing toward their battered colony ship.
Then that's what we'll call it.
He turned to Lucinda.
Mark the location. We'll send a team to study the remains later. However, we must fortify our outpost. If one of these exists, there might be more.
With that, our story concludes. I hope you've enjoyed today's reprieve from your daily grind. If you like the vibe, hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. Because every bit helps get this channel spread to those who require a momentary chance to unwind. I'll see you for the next tale, my friends.